students. This is Professor Ahern, and welcome to Chapter 1, our first chapter of Selling Today and our class of Marketing 3337. I'm excited to talk to you about our first chapter, which is Developing a Personal Selling Philosophy. This is a very important chapter because it really establishes the history and beginning of the sales area as a discipline. It talks a lot about jobs and roles in the sales force. And then it also talks about the evolution of selling as a profession. So we're really going to get a better understanding of, first of all, what is selling? And then a little bit about why selling is different than maybe what you thought it was. And what are those roles and jobs in the sales area? And how is that sort of evolving, particularly in this digital economy? And then ultimately, we'll talk a little bit about things about where the sales efforts are going in the future. Where are sales forces moving? How are companies in engaging with their customers in different ways? So I'm excited to talk to you about this today and for us to get to better know and understand what is selling and a personal selling philosophy. So first of all, let me talk about this concept that we call here strategic consultative selling model. So first of all, when we talk about a personal selling philosophy, what the personal selling philosophy is really the idea of being able to adopt what we call the marketing concept. So the marketing concept, if we think about our overall organization as a whole, we think about how we want to implement and communicate with our customers. So it really gets down to the question of how do we want to project ourselves as an organization to our customers and be able to make ourselves be a value added seller. And what that means is we want to add value to the sales process. We don't want to just be deal makers or transaction people, but we want to be value creators for customers. We want customers to see us as a value added entity as a salesperson. And as such, to be able to really add value, we need to become what we call problem solvers or partners with a customer. Now, that's not easy to be able to become a problem solver or a partner. If we think about really from a foundational perspective, many times when we think about salespeople, we think about them just being a facilitator of the deal between the company and the customer. So for example, we go into a retail store and we want to buy something. There's a salesperson there that helps us. We go into an auto dealership. There's a salesperson there that works with us. Now, selling is a much more complex thing than this. In fact, we're going to get into the details of really what selling is and how it has evolved over time. And I think that's really important for us to understand and what the expectations are of customers, particularly in what we call the digital age today. So today, much of the data that's out there about products and services and things like that, we can go online and we can research and find for ourselves. So a salesperson is no longer just a communicator of information. We don't just expect the salesperson to give us information about a product. They have to be what's called a value provider or a problem solver. They have to bring things to a higher level to be able to achieve value with you. Otherwise, there's no reason for me to even engage with a salesperson. And we're going to talk about this concept a little further as we move forward. So let's think about this evolution of what we call the information economy and how things have evolved over time. If we go to the very beginning of when selling took place, I mean, really selling was there from the very early time of humans. If we think of the bartering economy where individuals bartered between goods, we even think about farmers giving product for other resources back and forth. And this has been around for thousands of years as far as the way things happen between the formality or the lack of formal engagement between buyer or seller. It wasn't really until the industrial age or the industrial economy age where things started to really shift. And we really saw an evolution in this concept of selling that led to more formalization of the selling role. So it really led to major advances in manufacturing and transportation. It also led to increases in capital and natural resource harvesting to be able to make mass production of products. In addition to that, really what we found is that these products had to be sold into the marketplace, and what we developed here is salespeople to be able to sell these products in the marketplace. And these companies were mass producers of goods. So when we have mass producers of goods, we have to have salespeople that can sell those goods downstream to our buyers. And because of this industrial age, this age of machinery and manufacturing, companies began to evolve in the concept of how they engage in salespeople, how they make salespeople sell to customers. And really, that evolution took place over time. And it wasn't again until we hit what we call the information economy. And that started in the 1960 to 2020 time period. And really, that economy had major advances in technology. So many of you were probably born after this time period or around the end of this time period. But there are others that are a little older in this group. But let me talk a little bit about that time period of 1960 to 2020, and many of you are born towards the end of this time period. But in the beginning of that time period, in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, what we saw is that information technology started to evolve. We started to see things where companies could communicate things more effectively with their salespeople. We saw phone technology be able to become popular, where we could actually do salespeople calling customers on the phone to sell to them. We saw people faxing information out. So we started to really see digital use of product early on. And it wasn't until probably the early 1990s that we started to see the use of the internet. But really, not much selling was taking place on the internet. All the selling was still going through salespeople and retail channels and things like this. So what we saw is after about 1990 to the year 2000, things started to take off more from a digital perspective. And so a lot of the roles of salespeople changed completely during that period because what happened is you could either buy digitally or you could buy through a salesperson, at least on simple sales. More complex sales, we still relied on salespeople as we usually do. And we see this evolution take place, and it really changed the way in which we think of the sales role in an organization. So let's think of 2020 and beyond. So a couple of key things that have happened in 2020 and beyond. The first that I would like to point out that I think is really important here is there's been major advances in information technology and e-commerce. So now what we see is there are so many areas, both in B2C, that is business to consumer sales, and business to business sales, which we'll talk about more in a minute, where buying is happening directly from the customer to the seller. And that is taking out the intermediary, that salesperson. So I want to talk about the role that the salesperson still plays in that interaction between the buyer and the seller. But that salesperson is a strategic resource for information still. So it's really interesting. So if we think about information a long time ago that we would get, if we wanted to buy a product, and let's say that we were a technology firm and we were trying to buy a new part for our machines, and we wanted to know more about that part before the internet and before the information age, we would obviously probably call a salesperson in because they know all the information and they would share with us all that data and everything about that product. But now, after the digital age, we can go online and look that up and research that for ourselves. So the question is, how can a salesperson really add value now? And the way they add value is by being a strategic source of information. So not only do they know about their own products, but they know about the competitors' products. Not only do they know about their own products and the competitors, they know about that customer and what products might work best for that customer because they serve similar customers to that customer. They also know the key decisions that customer is making to be able to make them more efficient. So as we raise up this level of expectation and understanding, we start to see that salespeople become more and more important and critical to the relationship. And businesses are defined by customer relationships. So the way we hold those relationships between our firm and other firms is how we make these ties between us and our customers. Salespeople still play a critical role in these relationships. And we're going to talk about this transition in what we call virtual or digital selling because of the COVID crisis as well. So one of the things we see, and I've done a lot of research on this, is as COVID hit, it really expedited the amount of emphasis on digital because it forced the fact that there's less human interaction. So a lot of digital technologies evolved. But did salespeople stop being around? No, they moved to different technologies. They moved to Zoom meetings. They moved to email platforms. They moved to digital exchange between them and buyers. Why? Because there was still a need for this higher level of communication that takes place between us and our customers. And so, although the mode of communication has changed, the amount of interface between salespeople and customers retains still quite important in the marketplaces. I want to watch a short video, and this is a really interesting video, I think, by Daniel Pink. So Daniel Pink is a New York Times best-selling author, and he wrote a book called To Sell is Human. And I want to view a little bit about what he says, how the information economy has changed the sales role, and yet still the relevance of salespeople today. He's going to get at a little bit about these expectations of the salesperson. So let's hear what Dan Pink has to say.
What if everything we knew about sales turned out to be wrong? For instance, we think the only people in sales are the folks who try to get us to buy stuff. That's sales as we know it, and it's huge. It's how 1 in 9 Americans earns a living. But a cluster of economic and social forces has reshaped our world. See those other 8 in 9? They're now in sales too. School teachers, art directors, software writers. Whatever our job, we now spend a huge portion of our days trying to get others to part with resources, pitching colleagues, convincing clients, cajoling kids. Like it or not, we're all in sales now. But don't worry, this is a good thing, because sales isn't what it used to be. The old days were all about information asymmetry. The seller always had more information than the buyer, and that led to shenanigans. But today, information is everywhere. Whether we're pushing Buicks on a car lot or peddling ideas in a meeting, the world has moved from caveat emptor, buyer beware, to caveat venditor, seller beware. So the skeezy, sleazy, lowbrow, low road is less and less an option. And emerging in its place, from cutting-edge social science and some of the world's most innovative organizations, is a new approach to moving people. It doesn't depend on being slick or aggressive. Instead, you have to master 3 essential qualities. The new age.
So let's think about this that Dan Pink talks about. He talks about this concept of what we call information asymmetry. And what that means is when there's differences in information between two parties. So it used to be when I went in to buy a car, for those of you who might have bought a car before, that I would walk in and I didn't know anything about what that car should be priced, what discounts are available, anything about what that car is worth. So I would go in and I really feel like I was being taken advantage of or possibly taken advantage of by the salesperson. However, now there's so much information available on cars, for instance. So for example, if I go in to buy a car, what do I do? The first thing, I find that car, I might go look on one of those apps like AutoNation or TrueCar or any of those and look up what I think that car should be worth. I can put in the specific specs of that car and learn exactly what that dealership paid for that car. And that arms me with a lot of knowledge. So now I'm ready to buy that car, and I think I really don't need that salesperson. So what happens? How can that salesperson still add value? Well, the way they add value is by bringing in information above and beyond what you might be able to search online for, being able to help you out in a way to be able to make your buy and your experience more pleasant. But they can't just rely on trying to trick you anymore. Why? Because you are able to determine whether they're telling the truth. Because the information symmetry has shifted. And what we mean by that is the asymmetric information now is in the hands of the buyer. So we have more now even, or what we call symmetric information between the buyer and the seller. Both are on an even platform between each other, which is a very interesting concept. So one of the things that we know is there's been some real shifts in the way things have happened in the market. So research now shows that buyers are 57% through the buying process before they even engage with the salesperson. What does that mean? That means that a buyer has probably gone online before I go to buy a car. What have I done? I've gone online, I've researched the car, I've seen what I want, I've seen prices of cars, I see what the ratings are of the vehicles, things like this, and I have a pretty good idea of what I want to get. What do? I've narrowed that down. I go in and I try some different vehicles out. So I'm more than halfway through the buying process. This is true for industrial buyers as well, for example. I go to buy an industrial part for one of my products as a company. What do? I go online, I search about that part. I understand if I'm an engineer what I want. And only at that point do I call in a salesperson. So it's completely changed the way in which I get information. People go to social media reviews, platforms. Twitter is one of the areas that people go to find out and share information about customer service. So there's so much information exchanged online that it changes the dynamic of the selling job. So another thing that's happened is 88% of US customers engage in some form of online research before they make a purchase. How do they do that? They actually go out there and they search online and study the product before I actually buy anything. And I'm sure you guys do that too. Any important purchase, I'm going to research it before I even meet a salesperson. So think of the way that changes the engagement between you and that salesperson. 78% of salespeople use social selling tactics to outsell their peers. What does that mean? Salespeople are going online to be able to share information, to share data, to give insights and things like this. And by doing so, they're getting customers that are interested in them. So, for example, if I'm an industrial company, I might, as a salesperson, go online onto LinkedIn and share with potential customers, share data, share insights, so that customers may contact me and be able to want to find out more about my products. I could do that through other media platforms as well. But what that does is it allows us to share information and get those customers interested in our products. So salespeople are using these digital tactics more and more frequently. We know that salespeople who are better at the use of digital strategies exceed their peers in performance by over 20%. There's been a lot of research done on this. So it's very important to understand that using technology and being really strong at it just only enhances you as a salesperson. So let's get into some careers in sales. So there's a wide range of different careers in sales. We're going to learn a lot about these throughout the semester. One of the elements that people often really enjoy about sales positions is there's a freedom to manage your own time and activities. And what do I mean by that? Salespeople are usually left alone to do their job throughout the day. There's nobody hanging over them. Oftentimes, they're not in an office. They either work from home or work out there in the field, and they really have complete freedom to engage the way they want to. They're just held accountable by how much they sell and how well they sell to performance. That's very unlike many other jobs and organizations where you're actually working inside the company itself and you have a boss with you and you have coworkers with you all the time. A salesperson is very autonomous, doing their own thing. In addition to that, we know that salespeople make well above average incomes. In fact, we know that many salespeople are being paid significantly above the average. Starting salespeople coming out of the University of Houston, or students in our selling program coming out, many of them make in the $80,000 to $90,000 range, and many of them, after 2 years we've studied, will make in the $150,000 to $180,000 range. So there's tremendous opportunities for pay and opportunities for performance. If you're a top salesperson in an organization, and what we'll talk about is like a strategic account salesperson that is selling to the most important customers of your organization, some of those individuals can make well above $400,000 or $500,000 a year. So it's a tremendous opportunity from the perspective of financial outcomes. In addition to that, you get what's called above average psychic income. And what psychic income is things that we get as rewards for how we perform. So there are very few other jobs where we are recognized and rewarded for our performance like we are in sales. Because we can track my performance down to the individual sale, to the dollar, to the outcome, unlike I can for any other job, I can metric exactly how I perform to a very precise level in a sales job. I know exactly how much I've sold versus my peers in my company. Oftentimes, we're recognized, rewarded We're given trips, travel, reward programs, benefits, much greater than anybody else in any other position in an organization. In fact, if we look to some companies will spend tens of millions of dollars on travel and prize rewards for their salesperson, as well as recognition. So, those people who are really into performing at high levels, oftentimes athletes who want to perform at high levels, they really thrive in sales jobs. Competitive people thrive in sales jobs. So there's real opportunities for advancement in organizations. In fact, in the marketing function in many companies, when I used to work in the pharma sector, one of the things that they would always say is unless you actually went out there and sold to customers, you really don't know what it's like to buy as a customer. So that when you go in there and start making internal decisions, you really don't have that opportunity to touch the customer. So people who are out there in sales roles often elevate themselves to senior roles in organizations if they're excellent and have a lot more credibility when they do. So now when we think about sales jobs now, it's become even more the case that there are two types of sales jobs. One is what we call an inside salesperson, and the other is what we call an outside salesperson. An inside salesperson are those salespeople who perform selling activities remotely. So they could be performing it from their home or for their employer's location. So they could be at a desk most of the day, and they're actually on the phone making calls to the customers. They're doing Zoom meeting calls. They're sending emails. They're mostly communicating remotely or digitally. A lot of these inside salespeople have jobs called business development managers, and what they do is they go out there and they start the relationship between themselves and a customer. They're out there hunting for new business, building up opportunities for their company. So, inside sales job is a really interesting one because you can work at home, you have complete flexibility, and it's oftentimes an entry level position for salespeople in an organization. The other type of job is what we call an outside sales job, and that's where we actually travel to meet our customers physically. So we actually meet them in their offices, in their businesses, in meetings, but we have a physical, actual buyer-seller connection between those individuals. These outside salespeople often hold what we call geographic or physical territories. So I might be the outside salesperson, for example, for my company responsible for North Houston or South Houston, but I would have what we call a territory that I cover. And I may have a few hundred customers in that territory. And my job is to go out and meet the most important customers and sell to them in a regular period. So oftentimes inside and outside salespeople might work together. I might have an inside salesperson who's developing the relationship or setting it up, and then an outside person who follows up and meets them, does product demonstrations, and closes the sale. So oftentimes the two of them work in unison with each other to be able to make our customer relationships more effective. So when we think about selling, there are two channels that we have to be aware of, and I want to be able to make us clearly understand that. And that the reason this is important is because I'll be referencing them both a lot through the organization through the semester, and we'll be hearing from salespeople in both throughout the semester. One, I'll often say B2C or business to customer, and the other B2B, business to business. B2C, business to consumer channels, is when a salesperson sells directly to the customer, to the end user. So this is in a situation where the actual buyer is the person who's going to use the product, and the seller is selling to the person who's going to use the product. So this could be retail sales, for example. Could be selling out of a store. It could be financial advisors or financial service salespeople that are selling financial services to a customer. It can be any wide range of opportunities. But when we say B2C, that's when a salesperson is selling to the end user of that product. Okay. B2B is when a business is selling to another business. So that, for example, could be a paper company selling to a printing company that prints magazines, for example. They're selling the paper, the printing company uses it in their process to print magazines and sell it. It could be a parts supplier that sells products to an automotive company. So the parts supplier is here selling their products. The automotive company buys those products and they put them in their cars. So one is called B2B, the other is called B2C. So there are a number of different job titles in sales, and oftentimes we'll see all this wide-ranging set of job titles. And these are all just a list of general job titles here, but I want to be able to give an overview of some of the most complex jobs to the simplest job titles in selling. So let's look at this chart. I think this is going to be really helpful for us. So here we have on the x-axis down below, we have what we call our cost efficiency. So right here, let's look at this. So down here, this is what we call cost efficiency, and this down here is low efficiency cost things. So these are very expensive sales, and then down here at this end of the axis are very cheap ways to sell. Okay. And then this is the amount of value that's delivered through the sale, that is to the customer. So the amount of added value through consultative practices, through problem solving, through everything that goes on is higher under this what we call value side. So this is high value added, and these are low value added. So obviously the cheapest and lowest value added is what we call a purely digital strategy. That's with no salesperson at all. They just go on the customer, they research themselves, and they buy directly from my digital platform. So it's very cost efficient, but I'm not adding any value. So when I start adding things on top of this, what we see here is it costs more, but there's more value added. So on the very top of this is what we call GAM, which is Global Account Manager. These are individuals that represent a major corporation selling and managing all sales globally to another major organization. So I'll give you an example of this. When Intel, which makes chips and processors, sells to a company downstream like Apple or Compaq downstream, or to one of the computer manufacturers, they then sell that product downstream to them, and they might have an Intel global account manager that manages that total relationship all over the globe with that company Compaq Computers. So that relationship may be managed by what's called a GAM, or Global Account Manager. They manage all those touch points all over the globe. That is one of the most complex jobs, to be able to make sure that relationship is strong. Usually this is a vice president level position for an organization. It's extremely important. Oftentimes, these people are paid close to $500,000 to $1 million a year. And companies like Siemens, for example, they may have one person that represents over $50 million to $100 million worth of business for their organization, even sometimes over $1 billion worth of business for their organization. So this is what we call a global account manager. Down below that is what we call a strategic account manager. These are ones that manage the most important customers, but in a particular country or area. So they manage strategic business for their organization. So they may manage very important strategic customers in the United States, for example, that is just below the GAM. So if we look at these, and then we call what we call the CAM, which is Key Account Manager, these are very typical titles of very important or critical roles that are managed within an organization. We're going to get very much into deeper elements of these and actually hear from some of these people in these roles. But what we see now is the roles that are tending to go away, and this is the term disintermediation. Disintermediation means getting rid of the middleman between the buyer and the seller. How do we eliminate that salesperson or that individual that facilitates that buy between the buyer and the seller? So as digital technology and all these other technologies get more effective, we can start taking out these salespeople. So we can eliminate this job of what we call the order taker. We can eliminate this job of the product information person that just provides information of a product. Why? We don't need a person taking the order. We don't need a person just giving information about our products. Those individuals are ancient jobs. And so what happens is we use information technology or digital technology to facilitate that buy, which ends up saving our company significant money. But these jobs over here to this side that add a lot more value, they are retained and still critical because we cannot provide that value added services through technology yet. And that ranges anywhere from what we call a configuration rep that helps to be able to set up the installation and implementation of technical products, all the way to these global account managers. So these jobs here are staying around. These jobs are tending to go away as time passes and we start to get more and more sophisticated with the way we work. So this is a really interesting, strategy as far as the way firms work, but we can see what's going away and which jobs are staying. So the next thing I want to point out is that one of the things that is widely known is that even if you don't want to be in sales, let's say that sales is not for you or you don't think a sales job is for you, the selling skills are what we call one of the master skills for success of the future. Michael Dell calls it one of the most master skills for success of the future. Why? Because we are constantly selling. Whether I want to negotiate my pay when I take a new job, whether I want to persuade somebody to engage in a behavior that I want them to engage in, whether I want to influence others or other individuals, maybe through I'm an entrepreneur and I want to sell my products myself or set up my own company. Whether I'm an individual working for an accounting firm that ends up being a partner that ends up selling for that organization, all of these groups of individuals use selling skills on a regular basis. So understanding how to sell and the art of selling is critical for everybody. It's what we call a master skill for success. So some of the resources that companies use for what we call the four sources for being trained for firms. The first is what we call corporate sponsored training. That is when you get hired by a company, they have individuals inside the company who train salespeople how to be better sales when you get hired by them. So that's one of the first types of it. The second is what we call training provided by commercial vendors. We're going to hear actually from Neil Rackham in a minute, who's one of the top commercial vendors out there and has formed a company in this space previously. Then we also think about what we call certification programs. This is where we can go online and take a series of courses to be able to help us become what we call a master seller. And lastly, colleges and universities are coming more and more critical in the art of selling. In fact, it used to be when we started our selling programs over 20 years ago at the University of Houston that there were maybe a handful of schools that had sales programs. Now, over 160 universities in the United States offer selling programs. Why? Because 70% plus of graduates from business schools, they go into sales jobs at some point in time to be able to make them successful. So the art of selling is critical for people to be successful in their careers. Well, thank you all for your time today. I really appreciate you spending time with us. And this is a little bit of information on chapter one. And I hope you enjoyed this information.